Number 1. Caffeine. As we all know, the main appeal to nearly every coffee drinker is the component of caffeine. Chemically known as a psychoactive stimulant, caffeine essentially blocks out adenosine receptors in the brain and takes their place instead, almost as a masking agent. The peak effects of caffeine can be felt after 30 minutes, but having a half-life of 5 to 7 hours, the effects of caffeine specifically on one's sleep can be felt many hours from that last cup. In conclusion, it might be better for an after-dinner dessert instead of that craved late-night coffee. Number 2. The history of coffee. It is said that coffee was discovered by an Ethiopian goatherd when realizing the effects the crops had on his animals, but what drove coffee's global popularity is not entirely clear everywhere. Rumors of its history, of slavery, trade, and even the discovery by an Islamic scholar from a trip to Ethiopia are all thought to be how coffee became popular in the Arab world. This eventually led to the establishment of coffee houses. This trend was adopted by Europe in the mid-1600s. Coffee reached the Western Hemisphere of Central and South America from the Columbian exchange brought on by Christopher Columbus's voyage in 1492. In 1773, causation of the heavy duty being placed on tea by the British, the Boston Tea Party protest ushered in coffee as the new most popular beverage for the American colonies in the New World. It almost made the activity of drinking coffee a patriotic duty. Number 3. The different types of coffee. When speaking of coffee, we normally think of the two most popular and consumed species, Arabica and Robusta. Arabica has two different varieties, Typica and Bourbon, and as a whole, Arabica is considered lower in acidity, better quality, and smoother in taste. Robusta, like its name, commonly thrives in areas where Arabica cannot, produces better yields and higher caffeine. Despite being criticized for having an inferior taste, Robusta is commonly appreciated for its use in espresso blends, being known to produce better crema. It doesn't stop there. Another species known as Liberica exists, which accounts for only 1% of the globe's coffee consumption. It can sometimes be replaced for other plants when suffering disease or coffee rust. There are even more coffee varieties growing wildly throughout the world that are untouched due to low economic value, but still are protected due to promote biodiversity. Different types of growing and producing coffee. A lot of quality that comes out of coffee can come from the steps of picking, processing, and drying the coffee. Picking needs to ensure each coffee berry is at its ripest state and can be a tedious task, especially when it depends on how meticulously done. Processing methods depend on the region producing coffee can also vary greatly. There's the natural method found in countries like Ethiopia, which leaves the coffee berries out to dry naturally in the sun. This can also cause problems with fermentation with factors such as ambient temperature and rain. This coffee can often taste fruity or winey. Then there is also the wash method that produces a clean flavor, milder texture, and lighter body. There's also the pulp natural method, which is used throughout South and Central America, which gives a heavy body and nice sweetness to the coffee. After these treatments are done, there are also several ways of drying the coffee, being passive drying, mechanical drying, or a bit of both. This ensures the moisture of the coffee beans is at 12% to be able to export. Number 5. Types of making coffee and what it does. The types of making coffee fall into two separate categories, percolation and full immersion. Espresso, however, can be considered in its own category all by itself. We all know the brewed method. There's coffee pods or even the new wave of pour over, but there are also some very interesting properties and qualities of brewing coffee through methods not commonly used every day for coffee drinkers. Espresso, for instance, was developed in Italy in the 1900s. It involves brewing a small volume of coffee, usually 8.5 to 17 grams, and requires a great amount of pressure in a specialized espresso machine. Espresso is revered as one of the best methods to enjoy a proper coffee, and is extremely popular around the world. What makes espresso so intricate is the different amounts of coffee, grind settings, and extraction times depend on the type of coffee used, and certain other conditions. This is why espresso machines are usually calibrated several times a day, as these conditions throughout the day can change. If you can find a proper coffee house, It isn't uncommon to see a barista calibrating timing and weighing their espresso procedure to ensure these consistencies are met every time. Number 6. Coffee's environmental and child labor impacts. All of the coffee you drink comes with a price, and not just what you pay for at your local coffee shop. Things such as waterway contamination from the use of pesticides caused by improperly treated water runoff from producing coffee plants is a major problem. Clear-cutting of forests and development of monocultures is also a big problem. This can wreak havoc on soil and even kill native wildlife and biodiversity. To go with environmental damages, there are also the societal impacts. Child labor is a major problem in the coffee industry and is hardly regulated, if even regulated at all. This puts more responsibility on consumers to look for traceability in their coffee products and ensure they make more ethical choices. As the coffee industry itself needs to develop stricter regulations on coffee labor practices, we ourselves can do more effective change in how we purchase our coffee. Number 7. Coffee and its flavor. The diversity of flavor in coffee not only comes down to the region at which it was grown, but more specifically the altitude from which it was grown and picked. Take for instance Colombian and Ethiopian coffees. These coffees are commonly grown at an altitude of over 5,000 feet and possess fruity, complex, acidic, and floral flavor notes. Brazilian coffee is grown at more or less a medium altitude of 3,000 feet and possesses a more sweet and smooth flavor. If you're lucky enough to go to Hawaii, an even lower altitude and prestigious coffee known as Kona coffee is grown. The Hawaiian Kona coffee is grown at less than 2,500 feet and possesses very mild and mellow flavor notes to it, with an otherwise uncomplicated flavor. Number 8. Peaberry coffee. There are so many unique characteristics about coffee and its makeup that go into its vastness of flavor. Take for instance the well-known peaberry phenomenon in the coffee world. This occurs when the coffee fruit yields one seed inside its berry instead of two. It happens to less than 10% of the world's coffee fruit. Fans of this type of coffee claim that it is sweeter, richer, and more flavorful all around, with the theory that the nutrients normally for two seeds are found in only one. Other botanists have argued that this phenomenon is rather a causation of genetic defects and a result of plant infertility. How does the peaberry truly taste? Perhaps you should buy a cup and try one for yourself.